talk, I'm going to be drawing on some of the things that some of the concepts that he introduced to us. So I think there's a good connection and some ideas flowing between those two sessions. Okay, so also I guess I've already introduced myself to most of you, but I'm just finishing my PhD at the University of Waterloo in Canada. So I work at a space called Critical Media Lab, which is a humanities research creation lab. And the point of this space is to bring researchers and artists and students and members of the community together to think about technology in a critical way that forces us to ask questions about our relationships with digital media. So for the past 6 months, I've been teaching a weekly yoga class in this space. Critical Media Lab is a space, as I said, that focuses on applied digital media projects that employ technology in a way that critiques technology, offering an alternative to the innovation-based agenda of the consumer technology industry. Originally, the idea of offering a yoga class within this space was a way to test the limits of what might be considered a project that intervenes critically in the cycle of technical innovation. Having just moved into a new space heavily controlled by the respective red tape of the university bureaucracy and the city of Kitchener, where this is located, proposing a yoga class with all of its risks for liability and its seeming disconnect from the digital world seemed an appropriate way to explore the boundaries of digital media research. So the initial goal for the class was simply to provide practitioners, so students of the lab, employees from the local health sector, and other members of the community with an opportunity to be present in their own bodies. So it seems like a modest goal, but one that seems increasingly elusive for these growing members of the so-called creative industries. Interestingly, the lab itself was housed in a once industrial building, a former post office facility where employees at one time lined up alongside a conveyor belt, mechanically applying their bodies to the task of sorting mail, while managers hovered invisibly and over in a passive way, surveilling them through mirrored glass. This kind of work was repetitious, tedious, but inescapably bodily. The hall room is now filled with thousands of dollars of Apple equipment and an odd mix of modern classroom furniture and dated office paraphernalia from a bygone era. The work that happens here now is for the most part intellectual and sedentary, digital and screen-based. So as all yoga classes should be, these ones are designed to be accessible to everyone interested in attending. While the yoga classes we are familiar with in the Western world typically move through a series of physical poses, or asana, that carry with them a particular set of cues for properly aligning the body and engaging particular muscle groups. The ultimate truth of any yoga class is to listen to your own body and to do only what feels right. What I mean to say is that it's not about doing the pose right. Of course, the goal is to not hurt yourself, but also to make new shapes that bring yourself into awareness of your body. So we are all built uniquely, and we all have our own strengths and limitations, however you may define these. This means that many different variations of each pose are offered, including ones that benefit both disabled and temporarily able-bodied students. This also means that students must not always listen to the teacher, but learn to connect to a personal intuition that sometimes provides a better alternative. So the important lesson is this connection with the body, and that lesson carries rewards beyond the walls of the studio space. In our classes, the physical practice is offered in tandem with breathing exercises and opportunities for meditation. This practice comes out of the tradition of yoga, but I don't incorporate any kind of religious attachment to this. It's a practice that emerged out of the same sacred texts as Hinduism, the Vedas, but it's simply seen as a practice to create a certain, what can be seen as a healthy lifestyle or a way of being in the world. So those two I see as not necessarily connected, aside from the tradition being one that is promoted through teachings of Hinduism. But in this presentation, I'm not going to go into great detail about that history What I will do is attempt to draw yoga philosophy into conversation with theories about technology in order to think about human cognition and embodiment as well as technicity. For one, why did it seem important, relevant, and maybe even necessary to teach a yoga class in a media lab? Question I'm still thinking about. Following from that, what can yoga philosophy reveal to us about our bodies and minds' relationships to technology? Using the work of Bernard Stiegler, and he's a French philosopher, I'm not sure if I'm just familiar, but I'll try to introduce some of his ideas for those of us. I'm particularly interested in thinking about the ways in which our bodies and minds do not always mesh well with technology. People with disabilities are all too aware of the ways in which a lack of inclusive design results in ill-fitting technologies that require adaptations and assistive devices. While technologies are standardized to fit standard bodies, it would seem that no technological prosthesis is truly seamless. To some degree, all of our bodies and minds are disciplined into certain shapes by technology, some of them more or less comfortable than others. In working through concerns regarding Stiegler's concerns regarding the cognitive effects of digital media use, I'd like to explore the potential role of yoga mindfulness practices in harnessing the affordances of the body and mind to act with intentionality. I will proceed first by noting strange irony. For decades, people with disabilities have been deliberately excluded from digital media worlds. Not only have creators of mainstream digital devices and content design their products inaccessibly, but government regulations have never provided the adequate policies and incentives for bridging that digital divide. Statistically speaking, people with disabilities have less access to education, job opportunities, information, and social interaction because of barriers to digital participation, in part. The internet and digital devices contribute to this construction of disability by imposing barriers that promote normative expectations of human function. As a result, people with disabilities and their allies continue to fight for access to what is by now a universal human right. At the other end of the spectrum, there appears to be what we might call an excess of opportunities for digital engagement, to the extent that some critics, such as Sherry Turkle, Victor Meyer-Schonberger, Nicholas Carr, Bernard Stiegler, Manfred Spitzer, and others warn of the resulting devolution of certain normative human faculties, such as attention span, memory, and social aptitude. Too much digital media or an over-reliance on digital tools for information storage and socialization among those who use with access to technology is to blame for the disabling of human capacities for intellectual and social growth. In addition, problems like carpal tunnel syndrome, back pain, obesity, repetitive stress disorders, vision loss, and other physical ailments have been connected to prolonged use of digital media. Our current relationship to technology is so intimate that we might consider our world to be techno-cultural, with culture inextricably linked to technology. In this world, the Luddite stance of rejection is not a reasonable or even a desirable option. Although recent times has seen the emergence of conversations about digital abstinence and practices like email-free workdays and vacations from one's mobile device. In terms of human relationships to technology, we cannot see the symbiosis between human and technology as anything new, though the degree of codependency may be significantly greater than it was when humans first learned to create fire or chisel and carve rudimentary tools. We cannot escape this technicity, although we are compelled to question the nature of such a relationship, particularly when it would seem that our bodies and minds are being negatively altered by this particular co-evolutionary arrangement. So one potential scenario, elaborated by French philosopher Bernard Stiegler, suggests that unlike older media, electronic and digital media pose dangers to society because they threaten to disrupt the attention and memory processes that allow us to engage in collective individuation and transindividuation. So his arguments are dense, and I'm going to try to just introduce them. I won't be able to do them justice in this short time, but in terms of audiovisual technologies, Stiegler argues that the cultural programming industry, so television, radio, Netflix, whatever, effectively dilutes human attention to the basic function of consumption. He argues, here's the sort of long quote that you can follow along. The fundamental problem and the crippling limit of this attention control apparatus is that it destroys attention itself, along with the ability to concentrate on an object of attention, which is a social faculty. The construction of such an object is in fact the construction of society itself, as civil space is founded on cultural norms, including social graces, expertise, and critical thinking, i.e. contemplation. So televisual entertainment, according to Stiegler, is a form of attention control that weakens our capacities for imagination and fantasy, quote, constructing a consciousness reduced to simple, reflex, cerebral functions. Care is completely destroyed. So he's fairly critical in his technology, obviously. Increasingly, digital media have also become intensified forms of mnemotechnologies, so external memory storage devices. While the written word can be seen as an early technology of attention capture, Stiegler argues that reading engages the mind in critical reflection, as does writing. So if you're following along with this presentation and writing down notes, there's some kind of selective process that takes place where you're choosing what you want to remember and what you want to forget. Contemporary digital technologies, on the other hand, serve to record and trace all of our activities and experiences, becoming devices for external memory storage and retrieval. This externalization of memory causes our brains to operate differently, since we no longer process information according to a system of selective forgetting. Stiegler suggests that this hypomesis, the structural loss of memory, results. So it's not necessarily the memory loss itself that is dangerous, but instead there's this larger problem rooted in an attitude in the world that's fostered by contemporary digital media, so what he calls one of carelessness. In his prolific body of work, Stiegler warns of a developmental degeneration at the level of the whole society due to the effects of digital media. The antidote to this, he argues, is taking care. And according to him, this means paying attention, engaging in recognition, and developing investment in the objects of people and things in our world. Certainly, it's necessary to critically analyze human-technology relationships by diagnosing problems at the societal level, as Stiegler does. However, I also wonder if the key to such questions resides at the level of the individual, caught up as it is in the capitalist cycle of production and innovation and consumption. The design and creation of ever more alluring technologies that are increasingly pervasive, compulsive, and aesthetically pleasing is not a process in which we can meaningfully intervene as individuals. That's debatable, of course, but I think that personal awareness of one's relationship to technology is another story. I position myself as a scholar of disability studies, and so I feel the need to overtly acknowledge that the cognitive side effects described by Stiegler are certainly not felt by everyone. Indeed, many individuals remain without access to the kinds of technology that Stiegler describes, particularly due to obstacles that I mentioned previously. While everyone needs to have this option to connect to a world of digital content, a world that is rich with opportunities for learning, employment, social interaction, entertainment, information, and more, we all need the alternative option to disconnect. Our absorption and active consumption is, for Stiegler, a central reason why digital media have the potential to be damaging. In a world of ubiquitous technology, disconnecting is becoming less and less of an option. Turning to yoga philosophy, one key to escaping the cycle of de-individuation and hypomesis that Stiegler traces, I believe, relies on the affordances of the body, mind, first to turn inward and self-reflect, and second to act with mindfulness and intentionality. Here I employ the definition of affordances articulated by Brian Bluefield, Yvonne Latham, and Theo Rudipakis. The authors argue that, quote, the affordances of technological objects need to be understood in terms of the socio-historically contingent foldings of the body and the artifactual world into one another. So we can't understand the affordances of a particular artifact as emanating out of the materiality of the object itself. Instead, what we can do with an object is as the quote reads, a product of the ever-changing relations between people, between objects, and between people and objects. The authors use the example of fire as an element that we can cook our food with. However, cook with ability is not a property of fires themselves. Rather, humans have developed practices and equipment for making fires which are cook-withable, and importantly, keeping them this way, and thus preventing them from becoming house fires or forest fires. This focuses on action potentialities that emerge from various and shifting assemblages of agents and materials. So to my mind, one affordance of technology is the opportunity to occasionally turn it off. Indeed, most, if not all, of our technologies are still designed to have an off button, which suggests that we live in a social environment that still, however, decreasingly values the quality of turn-off ability. If we think of the human body/mind in terms of affordances, as the first theme asks us to do, the mind's potential to practice awareness, concentrate, and pay attention is an affordance in the context of social circumstances that necessitate this action. Specifically, in this case, the need to disconnect from one's environment and connect with the body and mind. In speaking of mindfulness as an affordance of the body, I acknowledge the context of a world in which attention is diffracted and controlled by various forces, including market ones, as well as the capacity for the human brain to engage in intentional acts of conscious awareness and concentrated attention. In this case, mindfulness can be seen as an affordance of the body-mind in the context of alienation created by the media landscape that Spiegler traces. The action potentiality is the opportunity to disconnect from compulsive consumerism and turn inward. Donna Farhi defines yoga as, quote, a technology for arriving in the present moment. And we talked about this a little bit this morning, this idea of yoga as techniques, as training as a system or a set of skills. This statement reminds us that there are ultimate technologies, systems, or sets of tools that humans have developed using the affordances of the body to mediate our relationship to the world around us. Yoga is one such technology that, unlike the exteriorization inherent in digital media systems, emphasizes turning inward or interiority. This practice, as it is most commonly adopted in North America and Europe, does not mean rejecting the world around us, although this is the goal among true gurus, but instead checking into the state of the body, mind in order to live well. Many yoga practices are founded in the idea that we begin by being present in the body, a starting point that opens us up to awareness at other levels. One practice associated with turning inward that I'll just use as sort of I guess it's just one example of many different practices that are part of this larger whole. One that I think is extremely central is the practice of bringing in awareness and control to the flow of energy, or prana in Sanskrit, that enters and exits the body. It's interesting to think about this system in relation to the consumption of digital information, I think. In yoga philosophy, prana is the life force that flows through the body, and it's directly translated as na is to go or travel, pravat, forward, so moving forward. Its movement through the body travels in 5 different directions, or winds, called vayus. Pranavayu, Appanavayu, Samanavayu, Dhyyanavayu, and Udnavayu. Pranavayu is best represented by the act of inhalation, so the process of taking something in, whether air, food, information, or otherwise. While we are nourished by an apple or a thought-provoking idea, as we are by oxygen, we are weighed down by processed foods or TV advertising, as we would be by other harmful substances. Certain forms of prana increase our vitality, while others simply drain us because they are difficult to process. Appanavayu can be likened to the exhalation, denoting the release of carbon dioxide or other waste substances that the body does not need. Emotional or physical constipation, for example, can result from taking too much in through pranavayu and not releasing enough through appanavayu. Energy is processed through the work of samanavayu, or digestion, which can be of a physical or psychological or emotional nature. When Stiegler warns of the dangers of memory technologies that externalize memory and disrupt individuation, he suggests that this active processing is bypassed. Having everything traced and stored for us, there is no active digestion of choosing to forget some things and remember others. Since we do not need to selectively edit the information or experiences we consume, there's no need for mindful attention to a moment, an experience, or another person. After digestion, prana is circulated through the body by beyond vayu, and even beyond the body through dispersion to other people and things. Finally, Una Vayu is connected to one's spirit or higher self, and is the end result of all the energy that we have taken in, released, processed, and circulated. So in yoga, the active pranayama is this conscious regulation of the breath as a way to draw mindfulness to these 5 directions of energy movement. This practice of breathwork is used to bring the body and mind toward a meditative state, but it also is the act of attending to the various energy forces that we operate within, although this might not be consciously happening when you're practicing. It also challenges us to become mindful of processes of production and consumption at a personal level. Acting with intentionality and mindfulness are central foci of yoga practice. Indeed, the reason that we call yoga a practice is because achieving mindfulness requires both discipline and self-study. So doing anything mindfully means being present in the act, which means commitment and determination to pursue the activity in a way that affirms the integrity of mind, body, and spirit. Our digital tools may allow us to easily slip into a state of passive consumption. The always-on nature of digital devices and information streams compels our constant attention. However, technology is not solely to blame for our social world conditions the types of feedback and relationships we expect from technology. Most notably, this feedback works to constantly affirm the ego and tether us to the self-validating social connectivity that we crave. Perhaps we have not sufficiently harnessed the strength of our minds and bodies to occasionally disconnect, to take a step back. In their characterization as pharmaca, that which can cure or kill, Stiegler argues that digital media also holds the potential for a return to individuation and trans-individuation through the possibilities they hold for creativity and collaboration, which I think is happening here, it's been happening here for the past several days. Indeed, while attention control technologies are connected to the fact that the United States suffers massively from attention deficit disorder, that there are 1 million otaku children in Japan, that China has had to take action against the effects of video games. Stiegler notes, alternatively, the battle out for intelligence has also resulted in the creation of universities with global outreach in places such as Saudi Arabia. Indeed, in order for this shift to happen, there needs to be a societal recognition that capitalist consumerism is antithetical to the goals of a healthy society, along with an intended shift toward new practices. While Stiegler calls for these sweeping changes to government and education systems, in the realm of education, it would seem that mindfulness-based practices such as yoga might assist new generations to realize the affordances of the mind-body in making choices about consumption. Indeed, to my mind, the shift called for by Stiegler and others who equate digital media with psychic and social deterioration cannot happen without a degree of self-awareness on the part of the individual. Returning to Critical Media Lab, where it first struck me several months ago that yoga might provide a good antidote to digital absorption, I find that there, in that weekly hour of yoga practice, my fellow practitioners and I create a space for reconnection to our bodies and minds, to self-awareness and interiority. Even though the ringtone of a cell phone or two usually pierces through the concentrated silence of the past, we observe the practice of ignoring that call, choosing instead to be present with ourselves and with each other. Perfect. Thank you.
Making this big argument to speaker and trying to connect speaker to paintings of the body, which is not so obvious. Because most of the time, especially in taking care, talks about techniques of psychological problems, or techniques of consciousness and stream of consciousness, and how memorization techniques try to capture the temporal levels of our consciousness, intentions, potentials, and all these phenomenological aspects of Husserl. And I just have more or less two questions. Did I get you right that yoga is for you a kind of body technique that makes it able to kind of re-democratize kind of a collective, a human ensemble through this body technique, which will make the transition from individuation to trans-individuation? So that's the aim of Stika, to try to get a kind of new attachment to techniques to create a potential for democratization.
Exactly, yeah.
And the second question, that would be one thing that was not mentioned explicitly, but I think it's quite important for Stika, is the kind of the libido economy. So the question of the desire, and what's driving the desire, what techniques drive the desire, because no desire is natural. That's the main aspect of Stika, because all desire is driven technically, logically. So this would be the second question. What role plays this technology of desire for? And the first question would be related to the relation of yoga as body techniques. So then,
yes. I think the first question basically said it, but yes, I think that is that's the connection that I'm trying to make here. I think that although it seems like an individualistic kind of practice, yoga is actually about the fact that if we can sorry to use crass terminology, but if we can get our own shit together, then we can be there for everybody else, right? So it's this idea that it starts with the individual connecting to an inner sense of self, which is individuation, right? Sort of breaking through the ego that prevents us from connecting to that. And then that allows for trans-individuation to happen, and that would be, I guess, the democratic spirit that you're referring to. Does that answer?
Yeah, the question of the technologies of desire.
And the second question is a really
Is
big
yoga
question.
a natural desire, but if not, what's techniques are the techniques of the desire for yoga?
In terms of desire, Stika talks about taking care and needing to be that economy that we work towards, right? The idea of care. How do we create a desire? Or how do we...
But isn't yoga a technology of non-desire?
It is about detachment from that egoic impulse, yeah. But I think, how do we define desire in this case? What do you think? Yeah, how do you define...
Well, maybe you could answer like this. It's like a non-desire, it's something different, but what sense?
At least in the intention. Sorry?
Something like the drive, this kind of instinct.
I think Spiegel talks a lot about that instinct of the relationship between generations, right? Of wanting to, the parental instinct or the instinct.
I think that we have to distinguish how specific understandings of yoga happen in specific contexts. It's nothing to do yoga like 2,000 years ago in India. The yoga in a post-Victorian era of neoliberal economies, where we have inherited a whole bourgeois construct of economies of desire, of lack, of psychoanalysis and all this shit, that make us then bring yoga as a kind of way of healing our super-individualistic lacks and all this inherited structure. So what sense does yoga suddenly acquire in this kind of context as a part of an economy of desire, which is inherited and re-engineered by current capitalistic technologies, media and so on? How is itself yoga made desirable in a post-colonial context of something that's kind of exotic, that's kind of providing a new age sense also of coolness? So there's many things there that make yoga desirable itself. That's part of an interesting picture of economies of desire in media. Then there's also how yoga presents itself sometimes as cutting off individual desire while being at the same time possibly part of neoliberal economies of desire. So I think it's very complex.
Yes, but I think
We cannot generalize yoga.
Yeah.
How particular accounts of yoga happen in particular contexts.
Yeah, and I think that it is correct in a way that my preoccupation is in relationship to how that is contextualized within another commodified technique or technique that will perhaps improve you in certain aspects. And of course, there is certain evidence of commodification of many practices. And then there's another counterpart, there is evidence of the health benefits, or even benefits in relationship to certain practices, from psychoanalysis to, the reasons of how psychoanalysis migrated to America are kind of interesting. So I think that what I think is interesting is the conflation, of many variables in relationship to these two models of individuation, of trans-individuation in relationship to a fully different, that's kind of dangerous in a way, or challenging in relation to what we think the self is and how it's related. And in relationship to the idea of desire, in a lot of yogic philosophy and Buddhist philosophy, mostly where mindfulness actually comes from more directly from the Buddhist history. So desire, actually mindfulness, is a technique created to understand the craving mind. In the model, I'm talking about the psychological model of Buddhist psychology. So actually, and I'm not relating it with what Stigler would say about this, but in Buddhist psychology, mindfulness actually what is watching is the mind, the craving and rejecting mind. That is literally, in the Buddhist psychology model, how the mind engages with the world. I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this. That's the fundamental craving, or I don't want this. So, and the other part, and then we're talking about psychological model, that is a model to eliminate suffering. Is that, in a way, that's kind of perhaps different scopes.
Sorry, I have to cut this because we are already behind the schedule and the technician is waiting outside to unscrew this thing here, and we have to start because some of us will catch the train flight back to the town. So we have to start 1:45 with the missing.
Yeah, but we need 1 hour for building up. I hope we can manage. Because we said we start early and finish early, so...
Okay, I think you can do it, I hope.
Yeah.
Okay, at least we are planning to...
Anyway, we are continuing the discussion in our presentation where we'll speak about affordances of desire somehow, and also and family and everything.
Yeah, in the meantime, we can continue discussing.
This other